So what else does this mean for the commercial world, Gerard? I mean, I hear you. It's a tipping point. It's a fast pace because I agree. It's all about journey. It's all about personalization, right? That's what it's all moving towards. You know, it's the entire e-commerce world that's for everybody. Everything's becoming so personalized. What does that mean in the commercial world right now?
Yeah, so it's a fantastic time because there's so much data that we're collecting as a result of moving into this digital world that we have now more data than we've ever had before, and it's rich, it's fast. But how do we handle that? How do we cope with it? And just before I go to that, though, I just wanted to highlight that we've talked about the fraud and that side of it. But in fact, the pandemic is also presenting another challenge to the finance world, and that's their own workforce. We're in a situation where they're having to make sure that their own staff are not exposed to the virus. Otherwise, it can cause an incredible banking outage. We saw the DBS situation earlier this year, where because one person came in who's COVID positive, they had to shut down the whole office. So I just wanted to highlight that because we are really talking about AI and machine learning. That's where we're going to with all of this. And AI and machine learning can even play a role in monitoring the workforce and making sure that they're keeping on top of or identifying the risk associated with the outbreak to mitigate any risks on their own workforce that they've got. So I just wanted to throw that in there. It's not just the customers, it's also their own workforce that they need to watch out for as a result of the pandemic. So back to the data thing, the rich and fast data that we're seeing. The only way that they can ever grasp this data and make use of it is with analytics. And analytics, I mean really machine learning first on the data and then artificial intelligence. And when I say artificial intelligence, I mean really decisioning. It's a very specific word. Making a decision based on the analysis, based on the machine learning of that data, and trusting a machine to make that decision. We're in a fascinating, not only are we in this crazy time of being pushed into this digital world, but we're in a time of this rich data and the ability to start trusting machines to make decisions with this data that's going on. And of course, we talked about the new banks, the digital banks that are going out there, and new enterprises might be saying, well, we haven't quite grasped this AI thing yet. Are we too late? And I would argue, no, we're not too late. For any of the establishments, yes, there are plenty that have been doing this for a long time. But if these agile new fish come on into play, they can jump on this bandwagon really quickly, actually, and turn that rich data into value as a result of using machine learning and AI.
So you mentioned AI, really, and you know what? Everybody is saying AI, but come on. You know, everybody thinks they are using AI, but are they really using AI? How can AI help in this space?
That's a very profound question, actually, because of course it can play a role in just about everything. So let's try and ring fence it into three main areas where I think, anyway, that the banks could use AI and machine learning to their big advantage. The first one is the practical side of compliance. And bear with me on that, because people might go, oh, compliance, but it's really important. And we are seeing this increase in money laundering. We're seeing these different changes, patterns going on. AI and machine learning can help them identify, reprofile their customers, identify new money laundering behavior, and catch it quicker. And not only the transactional side of it, but the profiling side of it, the understanding who their customer is, the KYC, eKYC. Now with machine learning, you can gather more data from all of these extra data sources we've got to identify Mohit, but we can also profile him more accurately using machine learning and AI to start risk assessing him. So that's just the compliance side of it. Then on the pure fraud side of it, there's two key areas where AI can play a role. The first one is when they're applying. Remember that dodgy guy with the mask coming in, pretending to be somebody else? Well, whilst he's applying, though, he will also be saying things that are not normal for that profile of person or that exact person. Because he doesn't know, or he doesn't want them to be that person. He wants to reinvent that person. So he will say things out of the norm. Machine learning can learn the profile for that person or that person if they're an existing customer and say, hang on a sec, what this person is saying is not him. It's just not behaving like him. And so they can flag that behavior and bring it up as a risk during the application process. And the flip side of it is that whilst they can identify the high-risk person, they can identify the low-risk person. And if you can automatically categorize somebody as low risk, you can speed up the approval faster. You can make it clear so that real-time approvals for low-risk applicants is possible with AI and machine learning, even in this new time that we're in this new world. And then we're onto the transactional side. Of course, we talked already about the online bankers. We talked about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all these new ramp-up behaviors going on. Real time, we can monitor the transactions that are going on and identify again that these are strange transactions, either strange for the person who's been banking all of this time, or in fact, it's a known pattern that's going on, and they can flag that within milliseconds and shut down the transaction before it even finalizes. That is machine learning of the data. That is using analytics to identify the behavior, and shutting it down is decisioning. That's a great example of decisioning, okay? And trusting the machine to make decisions. Now, you might say, well, that's all leading edge. How are banks going to move into that space? It might surprise you to know that SAS built our first project with HSBC over 10 years ago.
Right.
Okay, so we've been doing AI and machine learning and automated decisioning with major banks mainstream for over a decade. And so this is not so new, doing the transaction side of it or the application side of it. Where we are moving is learning more of those behaviors and saying, well, what does this mean for credit risk?
Right.
And again, we're into this new situation of the unbanked population coming on board. There's a whole new set of credit risk coming on board. And so by looking at their behavior when they transact or apply, you can say, well, how does that affect their credit risk rating? And start joining it all together. Right. So they're the three main areas: compliance, the transactional side of it, or fraud side of it, and the credit risk side. AI plays a big role.
Awesome. That is good to know. So you're talking about AI, and you're talking about the last 10 years of information that you guys are gathering with a bank, must be at multiple banks, but you're getting a completely new set of people with new banking era.
Yes.
So how is AI and machine learning going to cope with all this new stuff coming its way?
So there's new customers and there's new workforce in the bank itself.
Yes.
So for the new customers, again, this is where AI learns the new behavior that we're now seeing as a result of changing patterns. All these people going online that have
on scale,
never done on scale. Exactly. So coping with the scale is something that human beings simply can't do, and we are way past any level where really human beings can cope with this anymore. So there's the speed and the scale of the transactional side of it, and then there's the workforce side of it. The fact that you're handing the decisioning over to a machine that has learned from all of this really reduces the dependency on individuals to make those decisions. So it eases the situation of being highly dependent in a bank on a particular individual who leaves, for example, and then nobody else can make these decisions anymore.
Right.
Because you're actually handing it over to a machine to make more of that. So,
and unbiased, right?
Well, of course, unbiased. In fact, more unbiased than a human being, hopefully. Yeah, good point. So that makes it a lot easier for banks. But it really also brings it to a level where we're at a tipping point, where it's no longer where we should ask why use AI. We're now over the tipping point to the point of why not?
Why not?
And that's what's happening in the banks now. When they're having their deep strategic discussions, if AI is not in there somewhere, somebody will ask, "Why not?
Why not?"
And so that we'll see it in the mainstream.
Almost a prerequisite, basically, what you're saying.
Exactly.
So if it is a prerequisite, give me examples of this, Gerard. Otherwise, it's all theory.
Okay, yeah. One I would just like to highlight, then off the top of my head, is a bank in Thailand. Now, I've got to say, I really admire the way Thailand adapts to these kind of situations. And there was one great bank in Thailand where they had been using a analytics system for over 15 years.
Wow.
and a very good one, frankly. And it must have been if they were using it for 15 years. But it wasn't really doing the AI and the machine learning part. It was very much more rules, as we call it, which are predefined ways of working that can't adapt. And so they wanted a system that could adapt more. And when we showed them how our solution could use all of their data and adapt on the fly, they really jumped on it. And to their credit, they made it a great success. After just a short time of using our solution as a replacement for the other one, they reduced their case alert volume 40%. 40%. Can you imagine what that means, really, in terms of banking funds? And they improved their fraud detection rate by 35%. That meant they found more fraud than they did before. And they reduced what's called the false positives, the fakes, fake alerts. By only 18%, actually. They increased that as time went by. But can you imagine what that really means for their business operations and their efficiency? You know what? To them, that was not the most important part, and this is why I admire them so much. It was the better customer experience that they valued more than anything. And of course, the result was less customers had transactions declined, more fraud was found, and with the reduced overheads, they were able to offer a much better service to their customers. That's a particularly good example in my view.
That's a very, very good success story, because at the end of the day, it is how do you stay relevant, right? And that's what it's all about. It's all about the customer. And it's not about your own operations. It's how the customer is dealing. So what's the long-term impact on this?
You know, that's another great question, because I believe that all the real changes we're going through to adapt to this new customer base and this new behavior is long-term. We won't go back from this. So our ways of working will change, just like the customer base has changed their habits forever. Yes, of course, people will go back to face-to-face shopping, but will it be to the same scale as it was before? No, I don't think so, because they've proven to themselves already that it works. Will you go back to as many face-to-face meetings as you had before now that you're using Zoom every day? Probably not, because we've broken some of these molds that people were in, and they've started to accept being in the digital world more. And I don't think we'll go back from that. And as far as fraud is concerned too, unfortunately, it means there's a whole new long-term world for the fraudsters out there. But there is a saying, there's a famous old saying that you can fool all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool some of the people all of the time. And I think that as time goes by, we will all adapt to the increased risk of fraud. The machines will learn these new patterns and keep going with it. And if they build this infrastructure of adaptive learning, they can even adapt in the future, but they're ready for it. They can adapt and go with it. So the smart and agile financial institutions could end up coming out of this better than before, and certainly have a platform for growth and agility for the long term.
Coming out better if they adapt to the new technology, use what's available, bring in AI, ML, and make that part of the DNA. Otherwise, it's all tech, right? So what does that really mean in the fraud world right about now? What's the future for us?
Yeah, so I believe that implementing AI and machine learning in everything that they do will become a new normal in that way too, to give the phrase. But we'll see it becoming mainstream. It won't take over everything, definitely not. But it will improve the way we work in a way that we'll never go back.
Correct. Because you know what they say, it takes 21 days to get a habit going. It takes 90 days to change a lifestyle. Now, we all have gone through that, right? So we're way past that 90-day cycle. Okay, so yes. So then where is... Okay, yeah.
That is it. And then to really wrap it up in simple terms, as I mentioned before, we're getting more data than we ever had before. It's faster, it's richer than we've ever had before. And organizations have that capacity to get more value from that data than they've ever had before. But as I mentioned, the only way that they can do it is with analytics. That is to get it out. And when I say analytics, I mean every technique that you use in the analytic portfolio, like data mining, artificial intelligence, statistical modeling, text analytics, forecasting. We could go on all the different modeling techniques that are out there, even into image recognition and pattern recognition, all of those kind of things. That's all embedded in the great word of analytics. And we have the opportunity to transform this new world of massive data that we've got into a world of actionable intelligence.
I can agree with you more. Gerard, thank you for your time. Appreciate you being over here.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.